Welcome, lovely one, to the Meant for More podcast. My name's Lisa Clifford, and I am building the world's most empowering Meant for More movement, leading millions of heart-led purpose seekers from feeling insignificant to invincible. So I truly hope you enjoy this next episode. Welcome, lovely one, to the Meant for More podcast. And we have my gorgeous friend and coach, Dawn Breslin. She has had a career in TV and radio as a TV and radio presenter. Now, that's when I first saw you, Dawn.
Wow.
And Dawn is a best-selling Hay House author. And Dawn, you first came into my soul sphere, I think it was in 2004 or 5. I remember seeing you on, was it Sky and was it the Discovery Channel?
It was on the Discovery Channel, so I had my own series called
I had no idea who you were, but I absolutely loved you and loved that series.
Yeah, I think
There was just something amazing about it. I seem to remember it all being lit up by candles. Was that one episode or was that always your introduction? I'm going back over 20 years now.
it's 20 years ago. I think what we did is we did these individual people's lives, and I dived into their lives and supported them with coaching. And I also did training programs. I think the candles would have been on a day where we did a group training. There would have been lots and lots of candles. I can't even remember 20 years ago.
I think I remember that episode. I think he did a reflection day and people had to bring a picture, a photograph of themselves, a younger version of themselves.
The work that I do. So it's looking at the inner child, the young you, how you felt, how you imagined life, what your dreams were. You know, we kind of look back at all that stuff. Yeah.
I mean, I remember that episode really clearly. Anyway, I want to start because I want to dive in with my first question that I think will be the foundation of our whole conversation. Can you share a time in your life where you had that stirring, that ache, that knowing, or even just a great big bat round the head of knowing that you were meant for more?
Really vivid memory. I was 26 and I was really lost. I experienced a year of postnatal depression where, and when I look at it now, I kind of look at it in relation to other people's lives. I think it was circumstantial. It was this depression that came from such a dramatic change in my life. You know, I'd been a career girl, I'd been super successful, you know, I was achieving all sorts of dreams and ambitions. And then I had my gorgeous little baby and she had colic. And she had colic for 9 months, which meant that she cried every single day. And over that period, I went from believing I was this sociable, successful, fun-loving human being, you know, this big positive affirmation about who I was, to I was useless. I wasn't a good mum. That eroded into I wasn't a good enough partner for my husband at the time. I started to look in the mirror, and instead of thinking I was attractive or, you know, I liked what I see, so I started to really, it was like one negative thought just started to multiply until I became a shadow of who I was originally. And I kind of just thought that, you know, this lack of ambition now and this way that my life was this is how my life was going to be for the rest of my life. And that was a really daunting thought. It was, you know, because it was being generated from this place of not feeling like I was succeeding as a mum, but it was just driving. You know, I got to the point within a year where I didn't actually think I was employable. No one would want me. And before that, I'd been top achiever in the UK, working in sales and PR and stuff like that. Anyway, I remember this aunt of mine, she said, you know, I've seen such a change in you, Dawn. I think you have 2 options. I think you need to go to the doctor and get an antidepressant drug. Or you could come to this little workshop and kind of start to review your life. And I thought, a workshop. Well, my first instinct was I didn't want to go on meds. And I thought, but what am I going to do? Because actually, if she hadn't pointed it out, I didn't think there was any way out. And I thought I was just so stuck, so lost. And I thought, I wonder what this workshop's all about. So she told me a bit about it. She said, well, you just go, it's just a couple of days. You go along and you'll be with a group of people and, you just talk about where your life's at and you talk about your ambitions and dreams again. Last thing I wanted to do, but I thought I've got to try something because where I wasn't working. Life, everything was closing down. Your relationships impacted, your health's impacted, self-esteem's impacted, everything was impacted. So I went off to this little workshop, which was a Louise L. Hay You Can Heal Your Life workshop. And I remember sitting with about 15 others, cross-legged in a circle in this little flat. And I remember when they opened up the circle, they said, just say one thing about yourself. And I said, I'm such a happy person, which is really bizarre that I said that. But there was an aspect of me that was a really happy person, but I'd lost her, And then I can remember when we next went round the circle, they were starting to ask, and how do you really feel? And I remember just bursting out crying. And I said, my life's a disaster, I'm so unhappy. Anyway, I did 2 days at that workshop. And at the end of the 2 days, I reviewed my thoughts and how I didn't realize that your thinking could be the driver of the quality of your life. I just kind of thought when your life's not working, it's not working. And I identified that my thoughts were driving my life. They were driving my reality. So over the course of 2 days, I assessed my thinking. I questioned it deeply. Am I really ugly? Am I really a useless mother? Am I really a useless partner? Am I really so fat? Am I and when I started to question it with a rational mind and a different perspective, I realized I wasn't all these things. I habituated thinking them. At the end of the workshop, we sat in a circle, and I remember this teacher passed around a coconut shell with little angel cards in it. And I took a card out of the coconut shell, and the card said purpose. And I remember it was like electricity flowing through my body. And I thought, I have just reframed my whole life. I've taken myself from a place of what was circumstantial depression, stuckness. And I felt so excited about my life. And I thought, how many other people in the country, in the world, felt like I felt? And I thought, I'm going to make it my mission to teach this stuff. Mm. And I remember in that moment just thinking, I'm going to take this to newspapers, I'm going to take it to television. Because I can remember I used to sit and watch things like LK Today and Kilroy Silk back in the day. And, I'm watching this stuff, and it was kind of like the inspiration was, this is the latest bra, or these are the latest new trousers. And people would be sitting at home watching this, getting some kind of feel-good factor from it. And I thought, imagine if I was on there talking about what I'd just been through. So that was the thread that came in. And I knew in that moment that this was what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And that was 30 years ago now. And it has been my mission for the last 30 years. Lots of variations of teaching this stuff, whether television, newspapers, speaking on stages, now podcasts, all sorts of things. But it's the same thing. That gets me up in the morning, that it excites me, is moving people from a place of I can't have the life I want, into living the life, in some cases, of people's dreams. So that's where I started.
I mean, when you think back and you can look at your timeline and you think about, had you not had your gorgeous daughter, had you not had postnatal depression, would you be?
No, I really believe this was my destiny line. And when I look at my daughter now, and she's so self-aware, and she's been on this journey with me. She has traveled this journey of awareness with me. And I really believe, that there are certain experiences we go through in our lives that can in some cases be tragic, they can be horrendous. But in hindsight, in retrospect, if we do the work, if we process the emotions, the feelings, if we actually look at the experiences and look at how perhaps sometimes it's really difficult to see how you've grown on a, on an everyday level. You kind of think, how on earth did I grow from, you know, losing a child, or from losing my job, or my partner walking out on me? How could I grow from that? But I think in retrospect, when we look back at the soul growth that goes on, the kind of deeper growth, the compassion we develop, the insights we develop, the wisdom we develop that we can share with others, that we can lend to others from what we've been through. I think there's growth in everything we go through.
I think there's something about being coached by somebody who's got a lived experience of, because you've created your own formula, haven't you? The harmonizing process. Is it a process or a formula?
It was a process. So that was at a later point in my life
Yeah.
where I went through another huge life transformation where I got lost again. I went down. I would say, actually, I didn't get lost this time. I was derailed completely. Financial loss. I lost my money. I lost my energy. I couldn't work for 3 years. I was burned out. So it was a second time to really come off the path, to discover, develop, design, create, live into a whole new experience that is now very much integrated into what I teach.
That question that really got you into your truth in the circle, how do you really feel? I mean, so often in life, people will ask each other, how do you feel? And we'll say, oh, yeah, yeah, I'm fine. Because part of us are people pleasers and part of us are like, I don't want to be a bother. And so, but then it takes a moment for somebody just to say, I'm really asking you, I care. How do you really feel? And then that release somebody gets when they get to speak their truth, that they hadn't maybe even given themselves time or space or had the courage to answer themselves, but then feel held by somebody who asked the question. What's your experience of the value, the depth of value in that question?
It's incredible. It's incredible. When I went into that workshop, they said to me, how do you feel? And I said, or, how are you feeling right now? I'm such a happy person. And then, how do you really feel? Actually, I feel like I'm broken. I'm breaking. I feel like, and I think when we start to own our own story, Lisa, I think, it's almost like we have a survival mode that, we have a story that we pin, that we say, this is who I am, and this is how I'm surviving, this is how I'm getting through, and this is what I'm telling everyone. And if I let go of this, who am I?
And this is how I want to be seen. This
Yeah,
is how I want you to see me.
see me. Yeah. And if I let this go, who am I? What is my identity? Who would I be if I was to allow myself to say, this no longer serves me. This no longer makes me happy. But the terror of even the mind going there into that unknown territory, that unknown landscape of, who would I be if I wasn't in this marriage? Who would I be if I didn't do this job? Who would I be if I was to really say, I'm feeling depressed and I'm feeling stuck and I'm not coping? Because I think, here in Britain, we're programmed to cope. We share how we're coping. We share how things are fabulous. We're getting better at it, but we don't necessarily share how difficult things are. So when you do find someone, and I see it in my coaching, I see it, I find one of the most exciting things for me is working with groups of women. And they come into a group and, this happens sometimes. Sometimes they'll come into the group and they'll go, this is who I am. And then, literally within 5 minutes, it's like, this is really what is going on. And then they look at each other and they think, she's going through what I'm going through. I'm not the only one. The power in that in groups.
And they've been able to let go of that mask that is heavy to carry around. You know, that saying that people can't consistently be who they're not, but that illusion of who they think they need to be for so many reasons, that I don't want to let people down. I want people to know they can depend on me. Usually they hold a mask for other people's sake, don't they? And there's that certainty of how people will respond to them with that mask. I think, and I think the fear of uncertainty, if I'm not this, then that fear of uncertainty is too great. There's a lot of things we do in search of certainty, isn't there? Like we can put up with a lot
When
for the need of certainty.
absolutely. And we pin our lives on uncertainty. We need it. We want it. We want to know what's coming next. We want to know where we're going. We want to know the map. We want to know it's all going to be okay. And the reality of life is chaotic and it is uncertain. And I remember when I started to work with harmonizing, because a lot of it is about the seasons and it's about using analogies from nature and the seasons, consistently change. Every year there's a consistency to the chaos of the seasons, so we have spring and then we have the joy of summer and then we go into the darkness of autumn and then we have the cold of winter. And our human lives go through very, very similar cycles of winter, difficult, uncertain, dark periods and joyful, light, blossoming periods. So we have both, but as a society and our culture, we want to talk about summertime. We want to talk about eternal youth. We want to talk about eternal beauty. We want to talk about eternal joy, eternal happiness, eternal. And we're pretending, we're using the masks. And when we come into acceptance that everything changes, everything is impermanent, everything is in constant flux, there are going to be times where things are difficult and there's going to be times that things are great. There's going to be times when you're happy. There's going to be times that you're sad. And when we start to come into communication and conversation and actually start to share this stuff with people, through that vulnerability, connection is made, truth is shared, a whole new, I use this language, landscape.
And a self-acceptance. Because I think when you sit in that space of being completely yourself, and I think you need to be in a space where you feel held. So like your circles where you feel held, you're emotionally safe. And then an acceptance can happen of who you are under the mask. And because we're so accepting of who everybody else is, we also can be accepting of ourselves. And I think that acceptance can then lead to self-trust, can't it? Because I know who I am in my core. I was talking to a friend on Saturday, and she's going through potentially selling her business. And I was saying, don't make a decision just based on the information you have right now. That's not your set Sunday lunch menu you've been served. Wait wait till we have a conversation where we can look at all the ingredients, all the possibilities. Because at the moment, you're in a place of uncertainty. But let me tell you, there is certainty in your uncertainty, and the certainty is you. And I think that's the most, we forget that, don't we? When we're going into something, we think it's all uncertain, but the one thing that we can be certain about is who we are. And that I think there's a relief with that, but it comes from the acceptance of who we are, do you think?
Yeah, and acceptance of, like you say, acceptance, the trusting of who we are. But these are kind of art forms, these aren't things that, maybe somebody listening to this podcast, they might think, what do they really mean? And it is an art form, learning to accept the darkness and the light in you, the fact that, you might be a bit difficult in certain some circumstances and you might be amazing and wonderful in other circumstances. And when you start to really get to know yourself, you really, really get to know yourself and you start to embrace all of who you are, then like you say, then we start to build self-trust. And when we really build self-trust and it really builds to a level, then we know that we can handle anything.
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Mm.
If the business sale isn't right, we can say no, trusting that we can wait for the next thing that is right.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. If we don't have that self-trust, and it's kind of anchored in the heart, it's like, what do I really, really feel? What do I really, really know about me? But it's an art form. We've got to work at it. We've got to get to know this stuff. We've got to learn to listen to our intuition, our higher self, our deeper knowing of who we really are, what we really feel, and not even where we're going, but what is guiding us to move forward. There's a sense, I believe, that there is a deeper, a higher part of you that will want to move you. It will want to move you. In my work, traditionally, I used to say to people, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? What sort of life do you want to create? Now I'm asking, what is rising from within you?
Yeah.
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 And I see you work with the heart as well,
Mm.
working with that heart intelligence, that deeper knowing. But we have to cultivate that space because it's so easy. We've been conditioned to simply live life from the, I need this size of house, I need this kind of job, I need this amount of money, I need these amount of holidays. Oh, I'm exhausted, but I'll keep doing this. And there can be a disconnect from what really brings you joy, what you truly need. It might not be as much money as you think, Yeah.
What do you think the misconception is for people when they have the opportunity to really settle into what's their heart's desires? What do you think a misconception is about the possibility of living from the heart?
Yeah. So if I was to do what I really wanted, I wouldn't make enough money. If I was to do what I really wanted, I couldn't be happy. If I was to leave my marriage or my really, really, really difficult relationship that I've been working at for years and years and years, I'd be alone and I probably couldn't survive. And yet tomorrow, if you were made redundant, tomorrow, if your partner dumped you, tomorrow, you survive. Or, I work with people who have been through the most difficult things that you can imagine as human beings. And they survive. And sometimes they thrive. And I think, when we stay safe, like you do these firewalks and stuff, which is amazing because you get this opportunity to prove to yourself that you can do something you just never could imagine that you could ever do, or, a spear at your throat or whatever. It's like, I can imagine. I haven't done any of these things.
Oh, but I use arrows. Well, I might find a spear.
I know, I know. Yeah. People are in such a comfort zone. And because of, I think, what you're saying, Lisa, we don't like uncertainty. So we make these kind of tiny, tiny movements. I'll move in this tiny, tiny way. My heart's desire is way over here, but I'm going to do this because this keeps me safe. And I don't know that I can deal with change. I don't know that I can deal with, I might die if I was to do what is in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, you probably won't die. I went from earning, quite a lot of money, to earning nothing. Shopping in Lidl, no money for 3 years. Really, I stopped. I remember going into John Lewis for the first time in 3 years. I had to leave the store. I was so overwhelmed after 3 years of just never being in a shop, never buying anything at all for 3 years. In that 3 years when I stopped working, I have never felt the depth of joy and fulfillment and soul connection because I immerse myself in nature every single day. And I was in the deepest joy. I didn't have material things, but I was in the deepest joy. And what I've realized is that so much of the material and the money that we believe we have to make, we buy so much stuff.
We trap ourselves. We trap ourselves in that almost habit of buying that stuff.
Yeah.
It becomes a trap.
Yeah, it becomes a trap. And then when I had it all taken away from me, I realized I could live with next to nothing. And then what happened was there was just this liberation came that actually if I want to work, I'll work. If I want to, and then the decision of, absolutely everything I was going to do was just from the heart.
Hmm.
And then you will start to work from the heart, and it builds, and money comes and success
Well,
comes.
I saw, because I think I knew you more closely than I think I saw a, a, a birthing of creativity. I mean, I didn't know what you were like before, but what I witnessed, because I think you came on Facebook, and then that's how I felt. Dawn's accessible.
Yeah.
She's there. I can have her. But I just saw this birthing of creativity that looked like it just come from complete liberation. Well, in hindsight, when I look back.
And it did. It
Mm,
really did. And I feel like I was given such a gift. Again, back to the adversity. I was £100,000 in debt.
mm.
I couldn't work at all. I was so adrenally fatigued. I had no money. My relationship fell apart. Everything fell apart. And then there were other things in the background going on in my life, family illnesses. Everything just happened at once. And I went into, I think my nervous system, it was so shot
Mm.
that I started walking in nature every day. And then, Lisa, I used to go into the woods and my body was just like, I was so tired. I wanted to lie down, but I didn't want to lie down in my house. So I used to wear this big oversized Barber jacket, and I'd find a place in the woods and I'd just go and lie down on the earth, sometimes like for an hour and a half. And people's dogs used to come over and they'd find me. I think if
Dog walkers thinking they'd found a dead body.
I was doing it. I was doing it every single day. And then what happened is in the empty space, and as I began to heal, and I started to read poetry, and I started to read Taoism, and all the things that I wanted to do for years and years and years, but I never had the time. I started to do all this stuff, and then it was like this dance. It all came together. And I could see a process for healing people whose lives, who were just so exhausted, so lost, so detached from who they truly were. So I started to design this process, and it was the most incredible dance of creativity. And in that period as well, I wrote a film. Now, if I was in work every single day, that creativity that is deep within me, it would have had no space because you're just doing every single day. So suddenly I had 3 years of space to create. And in it, I designed a whole new process. I just wrote a film. I've started writing my new book. So it's been an amazing, amazing journey. And what I guess I'm teaching now is people to find time to reassess from the heart, who they are and the way they would like to live their life. So there might be corporate execs who'll come to me and they're just burned out and they have these desires for a different life, but they're so attached to the money, the certainty, the life that they're living. And what we've got to do through this process that I take them through is we start to dismantle that. And once we dismantle it, they put it back together and they might go back to work for 3 days a week and then they eventually leave. But they do the thing that helps them in the interim make the change. So I guess where we get into these models of life being fixed, consistent. This is what I do. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Oh, lucky them, they get to go travel. Lucky them, they work 3 days a week. Lucky them, that will never be me. That doesn't need to be true.
Somebody else living their life, their dream life, when they can live it. I think, can you just share what nervous system blowout felt like for you? I mean, I've had it. It's awful, but if what it was like for you, because I think so many people have it and then it becomes their norm and they're functioning with it, and I don't know how because it drowned me. What was it like for you?
So I was setting up an online business, and I was running out of money, and I got a bill for £50,000 for a flat that I own. And I couldn't sell the flat because this all happened at the credit crunch. It was just really bad timing. Anyway, in my mind, I believed I couldn't give up this company because ultimately this company was going to help humanity. And I was out there to save humanity. Somehow in my head, I had this in my mind. If I were not to do this, the world's going to fall apart. So I've got to do.
All on
So
me.
ridiculous thought, right? So one is like this kind of distorted thinking. So I need to do this. I was 100, the debt was racking up. I was absolutely petrified. I was moving 1p, £2 from one account to the next, but I couldn't give it up because, you know, the next break for the business was going to be around the corner. Everyone had told me how amazing this business was going to be. I had to see it through. I'd never failed at anything in my life before. I had to make a success of this. So that was the mindset. The other part was I used to look out the window. I lived at the beach and I would look out the window and I had this garden overlooking the sea. And I used to just dream of being in that garden. I remember on sunny days. But my to-do list was so huge. It was crippling. It was so long. And I really wasn't making my way through it because I was so stressed. I was getting so far. And I would occasionally look out the window and just dream of being in that garden, dream of being by the beach. I've got this beachside house, but I can't get out to the garden because the to-do list's too long. And then I would sometimes find myself scrolling. And I remember there was this retreat in Greece, and it was a women's retreat. It was called Awakening Women, and I used to Google it and dream of being on the retreat. And then I'd go back to my to-do list. So occasionally I would be taking these little moments, these little adventures into freedom, but I couldn't get there. At the end of my day, I was so exhausted. So I'd be working 7 till 7 almost every day. And at 7 o'clock, I would go to the fridge and I would have a large glass of wine to just try and bring me down. And then I'd have another one, to bring me down.
What was the feeling in your body of this as well? I mean, I can hear what was happening in your mind.
So I'm exhausted. I want to lie down. I want to sleep. I want to work in Tesco. I fantasize. I'd see people in Tesco and fantasize. I think the feeling in my body, to answer your question, it was numb. I think rather than it being, I feel really frenetic. This is, I'm out of control. It was like control came in and shut it all down, numbed it out. I was numb. I was functioning without feeling. Because if I was to feel, it would be so painful and I couldn't handle it. And in my head, I would die because I was holding so much together. And people's lives can take these turns where they have one thing after another, and they're trying to hold it all together. And I think we have to shut our feeling centers down. I think we've got to numb to get through. But there comes a point, and what was fascinating with me is I numbed and numbed and numbed, and then eventually somebody said to me, if you don't actually give up this business, I think you're going to have a heart attack or a stroke. And it was like my baby. It was like, workaholic tendencies. I loved working, and it was like, what am I going to do? Who am I going to become if I shut this company down, if I give it up? But when that girl said to me about, the heart attack or the stroke, I thought, there's a truth in this. There's something in this. And I shut the business down. My best friend came to stay with me. She helped me do all the paperwork. We closed the business down. And then I literally became catatonic. I couldn't move. I would sit staring at the television at the very beginning, just sit staring. My nervous system was so shot. But the answer to your question was I couldn't feel it. So it's not, so people don't necessarily feel, they might feel exhausted. They might feel like they want to work in Tesco. They might feel, these are little things like they maybe would love to go for more walks, but they know they can't. The to-do list is so long, it's never ending. I've seen it with clients. They can't get on top of things because their concentration's going, their memory's going, their sleep patterns are disturbed, all that sort of stuff. But I think that what we do is we numb.
Yeah.
And then I really luckily found, when I started to heal, I found a dance practice. And this dance practice called 5 Rhythms brought me into my body and started to undo the numbing and the holding. Because it was like a snowman. It was like I was just frozen all the way through. And these things need work. They need body work. They need mental work. They need emotional work to shift and move through us, you know? So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It has.
I'm still here.
It feels like life. I feel like I have that life does similar things with me, but it feels like life gives you an experience to get your attention, and you're like, "All right, I got it," and then you up level, grow, heal, because also you create things that it's taken so much hard work, courage. Like I'm guessing that part of that program that you created, that business you created, was centered around being on the TV as well, and being on the radio and being in the paper, and all this identity that must have been having
Yeah.
worked so hard to achieve it, and to have it, and to have this profile and this credibility, and to be known and to be there for achieving that dream that you had when you were in that circle. I'm going to take this out to the world, and then to give that up. I can't imagine how hard that was.
It was awful. But what was at the other side of that, which I now find fascinating? I didn't understand this until probably about 4 years into my healing. I thought that, because when I was talking about the distorted thinking, one of the things that I was thinking about when I didn't want to give up the business was, what were people going to think of me? I had the business had some of the biggest celebrities in the world involved in it. It was an online business. I had some of the biggest names in the world. And then suddenly I was saying, this is closing. It's not been a success and it's closing. And I thought, who will I be? I also knew that when I closed the business down, I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I was too tired to even coach people. So I was like, who am I going to be? What I've learned is that, we build identities. You have an identity, I have an identity. And we build them, and we stick with them. And we say, this is who I am, and this is what I'm projecting to the world. This is what everyone thinks of me. And the terror of dismantling, the terror of the unknown, of the unmanifested life, of the person that you are beyond that. You might not even know who you are beyond this identity, but there is another you beyond it. And what I found fascinating was, when I did let go, a film came, a whole new process came. It was like all these other gifts came in. But while you stay with what is familiar, while you stay with what is certain, while you stay in that fear, then that there is a limitation in it, and there is a real gift in even having a bit of fixed identity, a bit of fixed life, and a bit of freedom to allow yourself the time to pick up some paintbrushes for the first time in your life, to get onto a dance floor where you're terrified and see what happens, to, a big thing that a lot of my clients do is they'll go wild swimming, and they go into that water and something happens to them. I used to take them on retreat, and they'd go into that water and they'd be so invigorated. The courage that they felt, a bit like the fire walk, it was like they were so invigorated that it was like the being woke up. Something inside them woke up. Courage, strength, resilience, all the things it takes to go into cold water. It changed them. And how many of us are living a life that we just don't want to change anything?
On repeat, and also therefore unconscious as well. There's a comfort and a numbing in the unconscious way of living, which is, we don't need to think about the day that we've already lived for the last 10 years, so we can be unconscious. And I think there's a fear of being conscious, isn't there? In fact, we know that if we're speaking on the stage in a couple of weeks, we've got this part of us that's alert. We're nervous about it in advance, because every experience, it's not a one size fits all. We don't just say the same script. We're working with a new audience, a new opportunity. We've got people's attention. So there's an alertness about us that's required, but also that kind of, I just wish that wasn't there, then I can just relax tonight. It wouldn't need to keep waking, and it wakes you up, doesn't it? And so I think there is a fear around being conscious. Do you?
Around waking up. Well, waking up is about truth, isn't it? It's about authenticity. It's about leaning into what's really going on. It's scary because if I'm really honest with myself, am I living my life fully? Am I being truly honest with everyone around me? Are there things I would love to change that I'm holding on to? Is there a part of me that I know is unexpressed in this life? When we come into consciousness, these are the questions that we're asking ourselves. And I guess the first little step into that, it can be absolutely terrifying. It's because we're looking at, who am I really? There's who I have become, but who are you really at the deepest level, at the truest level? If you were to sit down, say, with you as a coach and say, this is what I truly feel. This is how I really, really feel about my life. And then the minute you make that commitment, that will impact other people around you, which is terrifying because we don't want to. We want to keep the status quo. We want to keep what's comfortable. We want to make everybody okay. But if we get really, really truthful, then we're going to create waves in our relationships. We're going to have honest conversation with our bosses. We're going to have to go to the doctor and address the thing that we've been pretending isn't going on. And that's scary at the beginning. That's the scary part. But the wonderful part is the feeling of liberation. It's the feeling of joy, the feeling of fulfillment, the feeling of excitement, enlivenment, just the exquisite taste of life when we do really come in to that conscious awareness of who we are and start to touch a life that nourishes us, that gives back to us, that excites us instead of hiding or putting up with the mundane, the
And
norm.
I think what I heard in some of what you've been saying as well is when people don't answer the question because they've already made some assumptions. How will I live? It will upset somebody. It will cause a ripple effect. It's going to dismantle my life. And so we make those assumptions and act as though they're facts. So we don't take the curiosity in our mind any further because we've got these blocks of assumptions that are, but even the toughest of changes, people can support you along the way, even having the difficult conversation with your boss. Done in the right way, your boss will be like, oh, don't want to lose you, but I completely understand why you have to go and live your life. In fact, I might know somebody that can come and help you do that. The unraveling or the realignment or the course correction or the next chapter season can actually be done with such grace and dignity. That's how I see you live your life, Dawn, with such grace and dignity.
Thank you. But I love that. And I think, I'm looking at your face and I'm imagining you as a coach as well. And, we're both coaches. And I often think that word is just, it's such a generic word.
I wanted to ask you about that as well, actually, but carry on.
Yeah, but unless unless you've experienced what it feels like to work with someone who is skilled in helping you deal with the difficulty of your life, deal with your pain, deal with your suffering, deal with your dreams, your blocks, unless you know what that feels like, it's like we just think we've got to do all this by ourselves. We've got to do it alone. And then you bring in this person, it's got to be the right person, but you bring in somebody that really resonates with you, that has experience, that's aligned to the type of thing that you need. And that support and that help, it can just transform your life and catapult you into places that might have taken you 10 or 15 or 20 years to get there. So, I love the field that we work in, this field of transformational change. And, there are such amazing people out there that are skilled in just helping the unskilled become skilled and taking away their pain and taking away their suffering and making this journey of life, which, I remember when I was younger, I used to think life is just such a joy. And now I think life is hard.
Yeah.
There are hard things in this life. And if you can get somebody to help you lighten your load a bit, someone skilled, gosh, what a blessing it can be.
It is. And I think that I was speaking to somebody last week who's going through a tough time, and she decided to do it by herself because she felt that she should do, because if she was a good person, if she was a good mum, if she was all these things, then she should be able to do this herself. And I just didn't try and persuade her out of it. I just thought that that conversation itself would be helpful for her, that eventually she will reflect and think, why am I so hard on myself about everything? But the idea of having to do it by yourself isn't how we originally would have lived, is it? Originally, we would have lived in tribes, in community, where everything was communal. Making the bread was communal. Looking after the kids was communal. Nobody was ever expected to do it. Hunting, communal. Nothing, we were never expected to do everything by ourselves, as though there's some sort of badge that we get, or we suddenly become more respected if we've done it by ourselves.
Yeah, and I think there's something in there as well around the people that really need the support are the ones that tell themselves that they can't have it, or they're not worthy of it, or depending on our backstory, how we were brought up, our experience with our parents, our mum, our dad, caregivers growing up, we have these perceptions of ourselves. And I work a lot with unworthiness, and I wouldn't be worthy of spending that money on myself, to get help. I have one client, and he's been with me for, it's really unusual. Normally I work with people and it's like 8 weeks or 10 weeks. He's been with me for 2.5 years. And he just says to me, he's just like, I remember meeting him and he really loved my event, but he just wouldn't. And then I met him in a car park, and he said his life, he was on his knees. His life was really just not working for him. And I said to him, come and see me privately. And he wouldn't, and he wouldn't. And then eventually he came.
Mm-hmm.
And worthiness it was the worthiness that was his biggest issue, that wouldn't allow him to take on the support. And now we've got him flying through work. We've got him, the investment has really, really paid off. But I think more than anything, I'm kind of on a certain level, I'm his person. There's somebody
Absolutely
to just be there to support you, to go through these really tough things that come up in life. And I think people who don't have a sense of self-worth, they think they have to do it by themselves, or how could they be so extravagant? Yeah, I've seen it with women's workshops. I remember I used to do workshops and they were £50 a head, and people would sit and talk to me for 2 hours to try and get me to persuade them to come onto these workshops for £50. This was a long time ago, because they just couldn't allow themselves. And the biggest thing I was trying to do was convince them that they were worth it. They were worth the time, and they were worth the money. £50, like, you would go and spend that on grandkids. You would go and spend it on someone else in 2 seconds. But when it comes to you, you're not doing it. Yeah, so that's a massive issue that I see.
Self-worth, I've always noticed, and including myself, noticed that we will never sustain something that we perceive higher than our self-worth. Will sabotage it. I used to see it when I coached a construction company, and I treated everybody so I treated them in their potential, and they operated in it, but eventually they'd sabotage it because they were being treated with so much more respect than they were used to. So I'm talking about joiners, electricians, that eventually they would just sabotage it because they were being trained, they were being personally developed, they were being spoken to in their highest good self. And it was so unfamiliar that they would, not everybody, but they would sabotage it. And I remember thinking to myself, me being single was a reflection on what I was putting out. And I thought, if I'm keeping myself single, what is it that I'm doing that's keeping myself single? And I would love saying, and this goes to this identity as well, I'm running my own business, paying my own mortgage all by myself in a recession. And I was really attached to that everything you see that I have is down to me. I've not inherited it. Some rich husband hasn't left me. It's all down to me. And I had a conversation with myself and said, you're going to stay single for as long as you're saying that as long as you're attached to that identity, you're going to stay single. And I thought, if you want to have a relationship, you're going to have to let go of having so much energy in that title. And I wasn't willing to let go of that identity. I really wasn't. I consciously said to myself, I am not willing to let go
And that
of
would be
owning
sewn
this.
into it would be sewn into a whole backstory, you, your life, your upbringing, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And until we explore these belief structures,
Mm.
until we look at what is holding me back, what is it that I believe about myself that's stopping? I love this. It's such a you know this, but it's just such a simple, and it's such an accurate and such a simple kind of metaphor on a level, that everything that you think on the inside is mirrored in the external reality that you're living. So the quality of your relationships, the quality of your career, the level that you get to, all of these things, they come from a narrative that we have created inside of ourselves. And sometimes it's really difficult to actually get to the core of that narrative by ourselves to change it. But until we change it, our external circuit, even difficult relationships in families, I've seen this, I've experienced it. It's like we've got to change the narrative on the inside in the way that we are perceiving things. And then externally, relationships will start to change and respond in different ways to us. The level, like you say, the level that you believe that you will go to in your business is the level you will go to in your business.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the stories, I mean, well, Dawn, we could flip and chat forever, but the stories we tell ourselves in order to understand somebody's behavior. So somebody behaves in an odd way towards, or a way we think is odd, because, or even the way that we've seen it in the moment that we're in that could be odd, that makes us interpret somebody's behavior as odd. And then we create this whole story, then we act as though it's true. And even in coaching, helping somebody unlock, is that story true that you're living as though it's the gospel, is so powerful. So I've got one last question, which is a technical question actually, which is, what do you think the difference is between self-trust and self-confidence?
For me, I mean, I don't know what the difference would be. I feel like they are both intrinsically linked.
Mm.
I think really to be confident, we have to have a trust in ourselves. We've got to have an anchored knowing about who we are. And I think as that knowing deepens, it deepens into a trust. And as that trust increases, it's almost like the froth, the fizziness of the champagne. It's like a fountain starts to bubble up, and we can express ourselves more in the world when that trust is really, really anchored. I've worked with confidence for 30 years, and, self-confidence is fundamentally, it's the lack of doubting ourselves, questioning ourselves. And the layer underneath questioning ourselves is coming into a knowing. And I think when you get to knowing that if you're thinking about moving house and you think, what if I make the wrong decision? Well, if I make the wrong decision, I'll make another decision somewhere down the line, and I'll course correct because I know I can do that. What if I were to leave this relationship and fall apart? What if you were to leave this relationship, work on yourself, and somewhere deep down inside you, you know that leaving the relationship, deep down, you trust yourself enough to know that this is not making you happy. The trusting, the knowing, that's the part that allows us to build the belief and then take the action that we need to take to express ourselves fully in the world, to live our joy fully in the world, to be in flow fully in the world, to be at peace fully in the world, and I use these examples of things like relationships. With relationships, there's loads and loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of work that needs to be done before people get into those places where they're going, I can't take this anymore. But if someone's in a situation where the relationship is killing them, or there's something going on in that relationship that is just so detrimental to their health, their well-being, their fulfillment, it's like these things, we've got to look at them. We've got to look at them. And yeah, so in answer to your question, I think they're intrinsically linked, but I think the trust is the knowing.
Yeah.
And we all have a deep sense of knowing. We have when you start to get into intuition, higher power, there's a part of us that actually, I had a beautiful client recently, and she's been telling me about how she questions herself in everything that she does. We were working with self-worth, and then I think it was about 2 sessions in, I said to her, I just want you to put your hands on your heart. And we'd had a conversation before this about how amazing she was and how people were feeding back how amazing she was, but she couldn't get to that place. And I said, just put your hands on your heart. And I want you to ask yourself, am I worthy? I want you to feel the answer, not think the answer. I want you to feel the answer. Am I worthy? Just breathe. And I wanted her to breathe really slowly, 3 breaths, just, am I worthy? She just looked at me. She went, I am worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a knowing inside all of us about what we can do, about someone calling, there is this knowing. And again, it's the art form is working out how to learn to get to that. And someone helping you really makes a huge difference to teach you how to get into that space.
And getting to where you trust what you feel.
Trusting what you feel.
Yeah, because hearing that answer, she then got a knowing that she can't unknow. She can't unknow that now, that she's worthy, because she felt it and you held the space for her while she connected with herself to feel it. And I think, yeah, I love that it comes from our self-awareness, our self-acceptance, and then us trusting that what we know of ourselves. Because I think I agree. I think that self-confidence is what we embody naturally from self-trust, rather than learning self-confidence. Learning self-confidence almost feels like being told to wear a coat in a certain way.
Yeah. And telling yourself, I can do this. Whereas, if you go into, the deeper knowing, the deeper feeling, yeah, it's a whole,
It's that, yeah,
to get someone there. But yeah, I think, but it just, even just very quickly, if someone kind of, if they were watching this and they're thinking, do I like myself? Am I any good at this, what I'm doing? You can just be so aware of how the mind sparks answers. And then if we actually go into the heart or go into the body, into the feeling center, and we ask the question again, you can start to feel a different response. Or even if you just breathe and just, it's just like breathing into it. What's really there? I often when I'm working with clients, I put the mirror in front of them, and they're normally terrified of it to start with. And then we do this exercise where they start off, and all they do is they criticize themselves when they look in the mirror. And then eventually they drop into the heart space and they start to tell me what this woman or this man is really capable of, who they really are. And it's like they move beyond the narrative of the mind, and they move into the intuitive and the heart space, and start to, and I'm recording what they're saying. I'm writing all down, and they often come out of that just going, so we have this conditioned self that is, and we have this true self, the authentic essence of who we truly are. And that's where, if you dream of things, the chances are you can actually achieve them. If you imagine, then it is possible. In that place of your imagining, in that dreamy space, in that landscape of new possibility. If you can take yourself there, the chances are you can actually go there. But so many of us stay in this conditioned self that just goes from the head, no, I can't do that. No, that's too scary. How would I survive? I'll probably die, you know.
And I think I think that when the mind imagines something, it's telling you, I wouldn't show you this if you couldn't do it. And that's different. If the mind imagines it, it's different too. If you see something and you think, oh, I could do that, that's different. That's almost societal goals or should haves. And then the other thing that I think in what you've just said about when we first look in the mirror and we criticize ourselves, I wonder, is that our true self criticizing ourselves, or is that, and I
Condition.
think you might have said that at the beginning, yeah, conditioning from what somebody else has said or what we think other people would say, but it's not what we really think about ourselves, which is the brilliant work that you do. Is you get people, you allow them to go through that layer. You don't say, you can't do that, let's just get straight into this. It has to go through that layer to then get into, now what do you think?
I think the work that I'm doing for sure is healing. It's repairing the self-perception. You know, my passion is just to help people who are really stuck, who are really in pain, and who know that they just desire another life and they cannot see a way through. Just to do some of this work, to bring them into the perception in a really safe, health space. Let them get to know who they truly are. Like make her or him known to them, you know, so that, and then when that knowing comes in, then the confidence builds, then the action begins. And if you've done that work, I think sometimes if you want to make a change in life and you've not done that work, it's so daunting. How am I going to do this? Whereas if we start with the mindset and we prepare the inner landscape so that we go into this deep knowing of who you are, what you're capable of, what you can handle. It doesn't look like questions like that. It's very much around worthiness. It's about knowing yourself. It's about knowing what brings you joy. It's about connecting, like you say, into the body and learning to know how you feel about certain things, learning to do that. And then once that comes, it's like there's an energy that comes. And it's
Yeah,
to
like a
build,
force, like you can't stop yourself.
and then you can't
Yeah.
stop yourself.
Yeah, it's all inevitable. And I think that I suppose hearing this, it sounds quite methodical, but I know from being in an experience with you and I know the way that I am, actually it feels like you're in the safest space and it's organic, but it's also skillful and it's gentle and it's also gentle enough that you can be in your courage as well. It's a powerful process with the right person. And I think that's the beauty of being with a coach who's had a lived experience, isn't perfect, as in, people say, but you're a coach, you're meant to have had a perfect life or done things perfectly or know all the answers. It's an unreasonable expectation or criticism that people can often have of coaches. But I don't want,
I think the opposite, Lisa. I think find a coach who has been through it. We've got the skill and we've got the training, we've got the background of the processes of understanding behavior, understanding how the mind works, understanding how to move people into heart intelligence, all that sort of stuff. We've got all of that. But the compassion that you have that comes from, everyone I work with, there are no right or wrong answers when I work with someone. If they are to do something in the next week and they don't do it, it's okay. There's so much compassion and gentleness that it allows them to flourish. And that compassion comes from the pain of
yeah.
lived experience. And I actually believe on the soul journey that there are some of us who have been through very difficult journeys. And I've been through a lot. There's the stuff I talk about. There's the stuff that goes on in the background that I don't talk about. But I've been through stuff. And through that stuff, when people sit down with me, I get it. I get pain. I get stuckness. I get despair. I get these things. And somehow when I translate that energy or, I'm holding with that energy, with that intention, with that awareness, anything that people open up and tell me everything about it. People do it in supermarkets with me. It's just like there's an energy there that is safe to express. And once it's out,
Yes.
we can deal with it.
And also there's a healing in it coming out and being witnessed, isn't there? But once they realize that they're in really safe hands, then because of your lived experience, then they can think, I'm safe to go there. And then that witnessing, being witnessed, being heard, being seen, not just being observed, well, not being observed at all, but being seen and truly understood is so powerful.
Seen, understood, and on the journey with them. You're on the journey with them. Our jobs are not to see our clients and then that's it. We are on a journey with them.
We've
We're
buckled
going
up.
space with them to get them to where they. Well, I often think when they come to me, it's like this becomes my mission as much as it's their mission. We are doing this. We are going there.
Yeah.
But the beginning can be tender.
Yeah. Yeah. Dawn, thank you so much for your time, your love, your wisdom, your heart, and sharing your journey. I've just loved every second and forgot that we're recording. In fact, I hope we have.
It's been lovely, Lisa. So lovely. So lovely to talk to you again.
Likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you, darling.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you would like to be involved in the Meant for More movement, then please drop me a line at lisa@lisaclifford.co.uk. Whether that's you're interested in being on the podcast, taking part in any of the trainings, or would just love to know how you can help empower others, then let's have a conversation. Thank you for listening, and we'll connect again very soon.